So, speaking of things that are getting patched and things that don't exist anymore, I want to talk about tank destroyers. Now, I don't usually recommend tank destroyers because I think they're about a multiplayer thing. Tank-on-tank combat just doesn't happen very frequently in single-player games. With that in mind, what's the point of making tank destroyers when 1 in 100 fights aren't even versus tanks anyway? Well, that's a good question. Is Dave going to give an actual reason to make tank destroyers in this game? Is he actually going to do that for the first time ever? Kind of. So you need to research anti-tank, and you get ops tests of the basic high-velocity cannons. And in short, they're expensive, they have lots of hard attack, they have lots of piercing, and they actually have a decent amount of soft attack too, so they're kind of well-balanced, actually. And we have the basic medium tank chassis. So in most cases, you want to go for a breakthrough tank, because people like breakthrough, don't they, on their tankies? And then you go for the basic high-velocity cannon. So there you go, big fat cannon on the high-velocity tank. Yeah, that looks good. Nice big barrel. Doesn't look like a tank, though, because it's got an open top. We'll go for Christie suspension because of the speed. We'll go for welded armor because that's the meta. Diesel engine for the reliability. And that's pretty much is the tank. Got way too much reliability, but once again, let's not worry too much about that, because today we just want to demonstrate a viable way of using tank destroyers. And I want to talk about why PDX have made a change, and I don't think it's a good change. The Panzer III-B with a high-velocity gun, it is basically a tank that will be used against other tanks. It's not particularly meta, and it's not particularly a very useful late game, or even mid-game, actually. Anyway, let's make an actual tank destroyer now. So what makes it a tank destroyer? You're basically just calling it a tank destroyer. That's right, guys. It's like a human construct. It becomes a tank destroyer because you call it a tank destroyer. And that's basically it. That's right. That's the only change I made to that. So what we've got here is 2 tanks. Both of them are 14 production costs. One of them is a tank destroyer, wink wink, and one of them is a regular tank. Which is which? Well, is the one easy way of telling is if a tank destroyer becomes a tank destroyer, it loses 95% of its breakthrough. So it's kind of one of the penalties of having a tank destroyer. But the other question is, why would you make a tank destroyer then if it only suffers from penalties such as less breakthrough? That is a very good question. I'm going to answer that question right now. And this question also will tell you a way of making tanks cheaper. So this is a way of making a tank division 20 to 30 to sometimes even 40% cheaper. Gasp! So we'll make a 20 width. I understand 20 width is not the meta. Please do not comment saying it's not the meta. I know it's not the meta. Shush. We're just doing this for demonstration purposes. So we're making a medium tank, which is 20 width, but will consist of 5 tank destroyers. It's got 5 medium tanks and 5 motorized. Here it is. Look at this, baby. And this is it. This is a tank, but these are regular tanks. These are not tank destroyers. Duplicate that division, and we'll change these to tank destroyers. There you go. So now this is a tank destroyer. And as you can see, for the most part, it's lost everything. We've got less speed. We have less HP. We have less organization. We have less suppression. It has slightly less supply, which is kind of cool, I guess. And it has significantly less breakthrough, which is painful because tanks are all about breakthrough, aren't they? So here we go, boyos. So we have 2 tank divisions here. One is a medium tank and one is a tank destroyer. But they have identical equipment. They both have high velocity cannons. They both have all the bells and whistles. What is the impact of this division now it is a tank destroyer? Well, the first thing you're aware of is it's lost a lot of its breakthrough. 104 versus 231. That's a lot of breakthrough loss. And remember, tanks are all about breakthrough. That's what they do. It's their job. And of course, all those other things they've lost as well. But a lot of those weren't really that important anyway. For the most part, the most important stat of them all was actually the breakthrough. So why would you want to do this? Look very closely in the bottom right. Can you see this? Estimated production cost. So practically 2,300 to 2,400 for the tank destroyer, but the regular tank is 2,200 to 4,200. So what we've basically done here is we've gave the tank division, well, we've lost a lot of breakthrough, put it that way, but we've also gave the tank a very large discount. And the reasoning for this is it uses less tank divisions per battalion. So 1 battalion of a medium tank is 50 tanks. But 1 battalion of tank destroyers is 24. So the overall, there are less tanks in the division itself, and the impact is the overall less production is overall used. I always talk about tanks on a budget, okay? I talk about this all the fucking time. So if you're a small nation and you want to be on a budget, and particularly in a multiplayer game, if you want to help out the other team, why not make a tank destroyer base division? Because it's going to be cheaper. Overall, have less breakthrough because you're not going to be on the offensive anyway. You'll be able to help everyone else out, but not having a massive impact, but at least you'll be doing something, right? Practically, the trade-off is basically that. You're having up to a 30% discount for the tank division overall, and the result is less breakthrough. That's it. Other than that, they're identical. Okay, now this is where you guys are going to get salty, okay? Are you ready for the salt? This is the latest stable version. This is not the beta patch. Let us load up the beta patch. So, we're now using the beta patch, and they have made a fundamental change in this beta patch that affects the said game mechanic I just talked about. So if anyone's not familiar, a beta patch means it's a patch they've not fully tested, and therefore they don't want to release it to the public yet because it might have crashes in there. It might have game-breaking bugs. It might have game-breaking exploits in there. Oof. So guys, here's where I personally think PDX have fucked up, okay? So this is the beta patch, and if you look at something very closely, the cost of this, to put it briefly, what they've done in the beta patch is they've made the amount per battalion exactly the same. It's 50 tanks per battalion, whether TDs or regular tanks, in the new beta patch. And personally, I don't know why they've made this change. This is a bad change. So now, if I make a regular tank or a tank destroyer, what's the point of making tank destroyers? What's the point? I don't understand. Tank destroyers now have worse stats. They cost the same per battalion. What's the incentive now of making tank destroyers? These two tanks have the same stats. Well, apart from the tank destroyer who has worse stats than the regular tank. So what's the point? The piercing and heart attack? It's the same gun. It has the same turret. So what's the point? This is why this is a bad change. They shouldn't have done this. So before, tank destroyers were a cheaper tank because it had a fixed barrel and you could use them as a more of a support role. But now, there's no incentive of making tank destroyers. There's none. It's just pointless. So it looks like the tank destroyer is slower, has less reliability. There's no incentive. Shouldn't tank destroyers have more heart attack or piercing? Due to the tank designer, that number is decided by the barrel. That number is decided by the barrel. In this case, the basic high velocity cannon. So now tanks don't have firepower solely based upon their generic name. So it looks like that what they were aiming for is to make tank destroyers more specific use, defensive, piercing, hard attack versus tanks. Personally, I felt they had more of accessibility when they were cheaper. Once again, I'm going to stick to my guns on this one. I don't think this was a good change. I don't think this was a good change at all. I personally think they should have made tank destroyers cheaper. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think this was a good choice. I think they've messed up here. I personally would have preferred it if tank destroyers were cheaper. What I'm trying to think of is whether this is historically accurate. I don't care. Once again, I'm playing a computer game. I want to have the most fun. When tank destroyers are cheaper, they serve a more of a use. You know, like if you're a nation that can't afford tanks, I wish you could try and make tanks by making a cheaper tank destroyer. Surely, like if you're New Zealand or Hungary or Bulgaria, you can make your little 44 width tank destroyer division, and it's more affordable because you can't afford the big, heavy, expensive ones. It felt like it fulfilled a niche, but now it doesn't. So when we add a fixed turret on, it becomes slightly faster. It also becomes significantly more reliable. It loses all of its breakthrough. Goodbye breakthrough. You're not going to be using this on the offensive anymore, which is super sad. And also you gain a little bit of defense. I mean, that defense is a measly amount. It's not even worth talking about. And we make it a tank destroyer and we gain a nice amount of hard attack, a very impressive amount of piercing, and then you lose a tiny little trickle of breakthrough that you had. You lose it, but on a heavy cannon now. So we have a decent amount of soft attack. That's pretty good, actually. Piercing is impressive. Hard attack, strangely enough, doesn't even change. Once again, loses all of its breakthrough. I think the most viable tanks in HOI4 are the ones that can do more. They can be a defensive, they can be offensive, they can fight tanks, they can fight infantry. In all fairness, they want to be fighting infantry because that's what they're mainly going to be fighting. And then having a tank that basically has one specific role. I don't know about you, it doesn't seem to be as versatile. Anyway, that was my take on that, guys.